We'll do a review in Lekutis Sichas and Chelek Tezvav, the third Sicha for the Parshas Lech. In this Sicha, the Rebbe discusses about the saying of the Rebbe Rashab, as given over by the Friedrich Rebbe, about the different Parshas Bereishis, Parshas Noach, and then Parshas Lech. The Rebbe is going to ask, as it's explained over there, how the separation of the different parshas represent different periods. And the Rebbe is going to bring in a fourth period later on, which is the period of Matan Torah. So basically, Bereishis, Noach, Lecha, Matan Torah. The Rebbe is going to explain in details what each generation, what took place during the parshas Bereishis, and what took place during the parshas Noach, even the way Noach comes in the end of Parshas Bereishis, and the way Avram comes in the end of Parshas Noach, as the Rebbe will explain in detail. The Rebbe will bring the analysis of the different types of imparting that a teacher imparts a idea to the students, as we'll see later on. So let's continue inside. Aleph. The Negeya to Parshas Lech Lecha, in connection with the portion of Lech Lecha, is Yedua der Wort von Kveit Kedushas Meiri Choma Admur. It is known, the expression of my father-in-law, the Rebbe, B'Shem Ovi Kveit Kedushas Admur U'Mahor Rashab Nishmas Eiden. In the name of his father, the Rebbe Rashab Nishmas Eiden. This is the language. Parsha Bereishis is a Lecha Sedra. The portion of Bereishis is a happy portion. Der Eibishter Baruch Hu hat bashafen Welten univroim. Hashem, blessed be He, blessed is He, created the worlds and creations. Der Soif von der Sedra, the end of the portion of Bereishis, is afilanit gor azoy gishmak, is not so tasty, not so good. Over there, the Torah discusses about how the Hashem's anger, Hashem regretted creating the people. He's going to bring a flood, but yet Abadoch is the closing Hasedra Afrelecha. But yet the general Sedra is a happy one. That's Bereishis. Parshas Noach, the portion of Noach, is the Ramabel. Over there is the flood. As is a Kalamut Navach. It's a melancholy week. Aber as is a Freilicher Soivach. But it is yet nevertheless a happy end of the week, because we read as is Geboren Avram Avinu was born. But the Emes Freiliche Woch, the true happy week, is our Parshas Lech Lecha, is the portion of Lech Lecha. Was alle Tag from der Woch lebt man mit Avram Avinu. All days of that week we lived with Avram Avinu. That's the true happy Parsha. So from them was the Rebbe zogt as Davke Parshas Lech Lecha is the Emes Freiliche Woch. The fact that the Rebbe says that specifically only the portion of Lech Lecha is the true happy week is tempting. So you can tell, as I feel in the Seivach from Parshas Noach, that even in the end of the week of Parshas Noach, which we does discuss about the birth of Avram, is noch nitod the emesis. There is not yet the true joy, as in der Woch von Lech Lecha, as it is in the week of Lech Lecha. It's a joy, but it's not like in Lech Lecha. The fact that Noach shares themes with Kalamutna, the melancholy, together with the happiness, makes it, even the happiness it affects. Since all matters that are in one portion, one sedra, have an association amongst themselves. Der Far is mitzad der Mitfreilichkeit from Klolos HaSeder. So therefore, because of the unhappiness, the unjoyousness from the general Sedra, felt euch in der Simcha von Siyum HaSedra, it is also lacking in the joy of the end of the Sedra. So that's why the fact that it shares the same Sedra with parts that are not so happy impacts that it's not really happy. Same thing is also to the portion of Bereshis. Even though that generally speaking, it is a happy Sadra from deswegen, but yet mitzad dem was soif is nit kora so geschmack, because the end isn't so sweet, so tasty. Is the thought the emes freilichkeit euch in Klolos HaSedra, it also is missing the true joy in the general Sedra because of the parts that are not so happy. So therefore, the question really becomes, so why would the Torah split up in such a way? So it would seem almost that the Parsha Bereshis should have left out the end of this left and finished before it starts talking about the sad parts. That should go to Noach. And in the portion of Noach, it should have finished before Avram's birth. So that would be a totally melancholy Kalamut Nesedra. And the portion of Lech Lecha would have had the whole story, including that. But yet it was not divided that way. Darf man verstehen. About das Parshas Bereshis Bichlaluso, since the portion of Bereshis, generally speaking, is a Freiliche Sedra, is a happy portion. Parshas Noach Bichlaluso, and the general Parshas Noach is a Kalam Mutnevoch, is a melancholy kind of week. But Lecheire gedarft sein de Chalukas HaSeder in an Eufen. So it should have been the dividing of the sections in such a way as der nit geschmackir siyum from Parshas Bereshis, the non-tasty, the end of the portion of Bereshis, soll sein de Haschole from Parshas Noach. Let that be the beginning of the Parshas Noach. So the whole Parshas Noach would have been Kalamutne, and the whole Parshas Bereshis would have been happy. When the Freilicher certain Parshas Noach and the end, happy ending of the Parshas Noach, laid the Avram Avinu, so sein der only from Parshas Lech Lecha. That should be all the Parshas Lech Lecha. Then it would be divided seemingly without taking away, because they're in one section which takes away from the happiness of Bereshis because it has the Mabul in there at the end, or the Lahashchis when the end of the Parsha. It takes away from the Kalamutna by having the end of Noach in the Parshas Noach, in the end, the story of Avram Avinu, and the end of Parshas Noach takes away from the Kalamutna from Parshas Noach. And why is it divided in such a way? So we should have all Parshas Bereshis happy, all Parshas Noach Kalamutna, and then all Lech Lecha would be the happy Sedra. So why were the portions set up? Why did the Torah set it up in such a way that you have part of the flood in the happy Parshas Bereshis, you have part of Abraham's birth in the sad part, the Kalamutna part of Noach, and why didn't we have it moved at the end of the Parshas Noach, as the Freilicher certain Parshas Noach leads Abraham in his own Parshas Lech Lecha? That should have been the beginning of the portion of Lech Lecha. The Rebbe is going to explain it basically in general, that the accomplishment of that generation, each one as it came about, has to do with the contents of what really was accomplished in each period and what is meant to be. Based, the Kolus Habir in them, the general explanation is Yedua, it is known As with Avram Avinu, that starting with Avram Avinu, we know the world exists for 6,000 years. So the first 2,000 years, the word was Tohu, and the second, that was the creation of the pre-Torah. And then the 2,000 years of Torah begins, the second 2,000 begins with Avram Avinu. So you do as with Avram Avinu, was the Ilu from Parshas Lecha is Kinal, and we talk about Avram Avinu, and this is what the advantage, the portion of Lecha was alle Tag von der Woche lebt man mit Avram Avinu. All days of the week, it's entirely involves, and we live with Avram Avinu. So what is Avram Avinu? What sich angeben with Avram Avinu? You started the Tekufa for Shnei Alofim Torah. That period of the 2,000 years of Torah began then. Torah was given later, several hundred years later, but the beginning of the Shnei Alofim Torah began with Avram Avinu. Uner is given der Erster von the Ovis. He was the first of the forefathers, was at angeheben der Achone zu Matan Torah, who started the preparation for Matan Torah. Und wie bald, as Matan Torah hat aufgetan dem Chibur von Elyonim betachtonim. What is Matan Torah? Matan Torah accomplished the connecting from the uppers and the lowers, connecting the spirituality, Ani HaMaskil, connecting Hashem with the world, and the world, Moshe Amar Alei, connecting the world, the Tachtonim, to go up. That was accomplished by Matan Torah to bring together, to connect the upper and the lower, is mistaber. So therefore, it is also logical, as Oich der Yisrael from Parshas Lech Lecha. We're talking about the advantage of the portion of Lecha of Avram Avinu, was the ganze Seder in Avram Avinu. It talks about Avram Avinu, who prepared the world for Matan Torah, so the advantage of this over the previous two Sedres is in them, was ir teuchen is the achona zu chibur al yerim tachtonim, is the fact that the contents of this Sedre is the preparing the upper and the lower. That is what the Parsha of Lech Lecha is. So to look and understand why the Parsha begins with Lech Lecha, not with the birth of Avram, which is mentioned in the Parshas Noach, is because this idea of connecting begins with Lech Lecha, not with his birth. As in addition to that, the fact that it's number 3 also gives us the general idea. Can say that this is also the explanation. Was Parshas Lech Lecha is the Drita Sedra. The portion of Lecha is the third portion, which is Al Derech Urient Lisoi. When we talk about the Torah, we call it a triple teaching. The Torah consists of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksubim, Tanakh, and we say that Urient Lisoi, there was a teaching of the third, as the Gemara in Shabbos says, that was given to Amtlisot, but is the Torah of 3. This is the third parsha, because the Kav Hashlishi, however, Emtsoi, because you have the middle line, that's the third and middle one, in between the two, the right and the left, the middle one was his Mechaber El Yenim Tachtonim, that connects the upper and the lower. That is the portion of Lech Lecha. It's 3, but it's a 3 which stands in between 1 and 2. It's the middle one that connects 1 and 2. Das heißt, which means, as Parsha Bereshis, that the first portion, which is Bereshis, the Erste Sedra, the first Sedra, is Toichno Bria Soilim. That contents, that talks about the creation of the world. Was is Bashafen geworden von dem Ebersten, that has been created from Hashem, which is basically Elyonim. That's the above. The Teuchen from Parshas Noach, the contents of the second portion of Noach, the Zweite Sedra, which is the second portion, is Zichul Hamata. That's the refinement the purification, the refinement of the below, durch the avodah from Noach ish tzaddik, through the service of Noach, who is a tzaddik, especially through the refinement that took place through the flood, which is tachtonim. That talks tachtonim. Parshas Lech Lecha, and the third portion, Lech Lecha, the Drita Sedra, the third portion is in Yono. Her idea, the contents of that is Chibur Elyonim v'Tachtonim, is to connect the upper and the lower. So now, under me, that sein verstandig, now that we have the ideas that that's Elyonim and Bresh is Elyonim, Noach is Tachtonim, and Lech Lecha Chibur Tachtonim, we understand how the portions were sectioned off, were split up. The mitzvah sein verstandig was Parshas Noach hebt sich on mit Eile Toldos Noach ish tzaddik. It begins with the generation of Noach, and that Noach was a tzaddik. Baldo redt sich schon wegen Minyone Noach, because here we're already talking about matters, aspects of Noach, was seinen gekommen durch sein avodah, that came through his service. We're talking about that he worked the tachtonim till the seyem shel tzadikim ma'asim tovim. As Rashi says, he says Eila toildos. These are the generations. Rashi says, what is the toildos? Those are the good deeds. Meaning, we're talking about avodas hamate tachtonim. But the part that is written in the previous parsha in Bereshis, which is Noach's birth, etc., Hashem, till the end of the parsha Bereshis, in which it states that Noach found grace in the eyes of Hashem. But those they were matters that mainly came Nit mitzad zayin avodah, that didn't represent his work, the tachten, nor mitzad isarusa de le'ela. This came as an arousal from above. The riber zaytzu parsha Bereshis. That's why they belong to the section of Bereshis. So that explains why the Parshas Noach, which represents the avodah from Noach, the avodah mata, the tachtonim, starts with Noach ish tzaddik, with his avodah, not with his birth, which belongs in the Parsha of Bereshis. The same thing is true with regards to several matters about Avram Avinu. Not in Parshas Lech Lecha, not in Parshas Noach, which are not stated in that section of Lecha, but in Parshas Noach, that tam derfuni, what is the reason for this is while Avram Avinu's avodas ha'achona zu matan Torah, because our father's Avram's service to prepare for matan Torah, which is chibur alyenim v'tachtonim, to connect the upper and the lower, hat sich ongeheben erst mit. This is only started off that special connecting that Avram connects, that started with and after Unoch and after Lech Lecha. When Avram is arois from Choron to Eretz Yisrael, when Avram left Choron to Eretz Yisrael, as opposed to what takes place in the Parshas Noach, Mashenkin, latest Avram Avinu, the birth of Avram Avinu, Uzayin Yone Avodah Bizlech Lecha, and his matters in which he served until the time that he left, they were mainly a continuation of Gemara V'Siyum, and concluding and finishing up from the refinement and elevating of the low. Those were the avodas recorded in Parshas Noach, which are general Parshas Noach. Was also angegeben mit der avodah von Noach ish tzaddik. That began with Noach's avodah. Noach was a tzaddik, the beginning of Parshas Noach, and that continued through Avram with his services that are recorded in the Parsha of Noach. And Lech Lecha begins the beginning of the connecting of the Elyonim v'Tachtonim. So now the Rebbe is going to explain how these things fit in, how the Elyonim and the Tachtonim connection starts Tafke with Lech Lecha after he left. In Ois Daled, the Rebbe will explain that these three periods, the period of the Elyonim, as it is Maaseh Breshis, and the Tachtonim, which is in Parshas Noach, and the Chibur of the Elyonim Tachtonim as in Parshas Lech Lecha, the Rebbe will explain through a moshul how a teacher, a Rav, transmit and teaches the Talmud, the student, in which there are three different levels. And the Rebbe is going to equate these three levels of the teaching to the three periods of Breshis, Noach, and Lech Lecha. And the Rebbe is going to introduce the fourth level, which is the idea of Matan Torah. Dalet. Otter Chilek zwischen the drei Tkufas anal. This distinction between these three seasons, three periods, unser Kishur mit the drei Anhoges anal, and how they connect with the three conducts, whether it's Milmaila or it's Tachtonim, Milmato, or it's the Chibur. And also, in addition to that, there's an Oichder Chilik zwischen der Tkufa from Parshas Noach, that part in the section of Noach, when es hat sich angeheben, der Sichel Chamata through Avram that we have in the end of the Noach started, the Sichel Chamata, und der Tkufa from Parshas Breshis, when the Amshocha Vashpo in Weltigem Zanomaylam. During Noach, the beginning and at the end of the parsha, as Rebbe explained, that also Avram, this was the Zichach Mata, and Breshis was the Hashochem El Mailo. Kinal Shom, as mentioned earlier in Siv Beis, Apapia Yichdan is given Avedis Hatachtoinim to Kama V'Kama Tzadikim, even though that even the period of Breshis, in that portion of Chumash, there was still the service through many tzaddikim. This will be understood why that is considered El Yonim and Noach is considered the Tachtonim by giving this motion. That Menklerer Verstehen, we will understand it more clearly. By bringing the parable from how the teacher gives an idea, seichel, the flow of the seichel, how he teaches and how it flows from the rabbi, from the Rav to the student, to the Talmud. Was in them seine dod that I close the kefanim over here, there are three general ways. The Rebbe is going to explain by the Hashpah and the Rav the Talmud. There is a time when the Rav just gives that seichel that he's intending only. There is a way in which the rabbi teaches the student how to understand. And each one of these ways when the rabbi gives it to him, it can give him a lot more, but he's limited to what the rabbi teaches him. But when the rabbi teaches him how to learn, he cannot on his own do so much, but yet now he knows how to do it on his own. And then we have the third level in which the rabbi actually impacts the student that he should be able to learn and understand it the way the rabbi understands it. Let's look inside. Ein Eifen is, one way is, as the Rav geht zu verstehen dem Talmud, bloß dem Seichel was is imashpia, that the rabbi, the teacher, only explains to the student that idea, that seichel, that intellect that he is trying to impart. Geht sich aber nicht up, but he does not devote himself to auslernen him, to teach him as allein soll kennen massig sein seichel, that he on his own should be able to grasp an idea. That's one way. The zweite Reifen, the second way is the Rav gibt dem Talmid aderech. The Rav gives the student a path. Und lernt ihm aus, and he teaches him as kennen, lernen und verstehen, that he should be able to study and understand on his own. Umbuvan, it's understood. As in Yedin from Beidei Fanim, in each one of these two ways, is the Amaila was in the there is an advantage which is not in the second one. B'shayches to the Chushe HaTalmud, as far as the capabilities of the student, is that Zweiter Eifenhecher, the second way, is higher. Because because it is this second style of influence impacts him that he can understand on his own. So that means, as far as the student goes, his capabilities become greater through the second style of teaching. But as far as it relates to the essence of the idea that the rabbi is imparting, is the first way is higher. But those was the Talmud versteht b'koyach atzmei, because that which the student understands on his own, durch them was the Rav hat ihm ausgelernt, wie zu verstehen, because that which the Talmud later on works out on his own because the teacher taught him how to understand, is as nor hasoga katana be'erech zum seichel was the Rabbi zi mashpia. That is merely a small, what he can do on his own. It's a small level of grasping relative to the idea that the Rav is giving to him. So the idea itself is much greater what the rabbi gives him. But as far as the student's qualities, he grows when he can figure out himself, even though that the idea that he can come up by himself is in a lesser level. Then there is a third way, a third way, which combines both of these advantages. That includes both of the above mentioned advantages. Is as the hashpah von Rav is poile from Talmud ad kedei kach, that the flow that the Rav impacts the student to the extent as the chushim von Talmud veren v'chushi Rav, that the capabilities of the student become like the capability he reaches to be able to the capability of the teacher. Was dann can show the Talmud allein because then at that point the student on his own can realize and he can come up with the novelties of Masna and Sichlim Nailim to understand elevated Sichlim Azvevi the Rav, just as the Rav. And the Rav is going to bring out that these three different styles is also the distinction between the three different parshas and the periods of Noach, Breishis, Noach, and Lech Lecha. Dalet. Ot der Chiluk zwischen the drei Kufes anal min Hey, we're up to. Yesh loimer, as the drei Kufes und Parshas Breishis, Noach, und Lech Lecha sein al derech Dugma wie die drei Fanim anal, that these portions of Breishis, Noach, and Lech Lecha are similar to these three above mentioned ways of a teacher imparting the information to the student. The service of the righteous in this 10th generation from Adam till Noach, which is Parshas Breishis, is beikar gewen mitzad der hashpah milmayla. That mainly came because of the flow from above, from Hashem. That wasn't so connected with the power and the accomplishment of the tzaddikim himself. Take for example Chanoich. Was Chosh as tzaddik hoyim. even though he was a righteous person. Notwithstanding that he lived during a corrupt generation. Because those vices and that points to his great service. Not to become impacted, become influenced from the people of his generation. So notwithstanding is that he was a tzaddik and he was able to withstand, but yet, he was very light in his mind to become and to do bad. If he would have remained for extended period of time amongst the people of his generation, he would not have overcome the evil. He would have been influenced eventually. And that's why David took him away on the Riber, and therefore Mir HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Silka shall quickly remove them. Why is that? Because his righteousness came from above, not on his own. Those was tzaddik hoyo. The fact that he was a tzaddik is beikir given was mainly not through his eigen koiches. It wasn't through his own strength, nor through them. It was through that was as hot by imeir given an ermil milo, through that a light from above shined to him. River, and therefore had he remained longer in this corrupt world, and he would have descended to a situation where the shine of above does not shine, he would not on his own strength able to hold up his level of righteousness as before. So that level of tzidkes that is based because from the flow from above and not on his own, so this is similar to the flow, the imparting that comes in the first way. Although the student understands in them seichel, and he puts an effort into the idea, was the Rav is in the intellect idea that Rav is giving him, is giving him, can aber nit mechadish sein, he cannot come up with a new idea on his own. So that is the avodah from the 10 generations, the tzaddikim in the time from Adam to Noah. The avodas hatzaddikim, the asora deis b'Noach v'ad Avraham, but the service of the tzaddikim in the 10 generations from Noach to Avraham, Yishem Beikir given, that was mainly nor mitzad ma'ir not just because of the light from above, nor mitzad zer eigenem koyach and oiftu. It was in their own strength and their own accomplishments. These azeir avodah, to the extent that their service it had a connection with the world that's outside of them. It's their own influence. As we find by Noach, as nit nor alain is at tzaddik tomim hoyu. Afilu b'dereisov, not only that he himself was a complete tzaddik, even if that was in his generations, or even though in his generation corrupt, and he wasn't like Hanoich, who was easy, as brought down before. That was easily, Shem had to take him away because he could easily sort of fail. That's not by Noach, even in his generation, as the one Pirush and Rashi. But still, and further than that, he also rebuked the generation of the flood. He told him to do tshuva. So this was even before the Mabul, but Achas kam v'kam noch the Mabul, and how much more so after the Mabul, was Demut hot Noach durch Avodas HaKarbonos gepoilt, that Noach was able to accomplish through the bringing the korbanos, the Eibishter's promise, the Eibishter's Haftocha, Eibishter's promise, I will no longer destroy the world. So all the world will never rest, cease. The seasons, everything will keep on going. Nature, the Eibishter is not going to destroy it again. That came through the work of Noach, bis zum Ois Habritz von Keshes, to the extent where Hashem placed the sign of the covenant in the rainbow, was Vaistav Zichamata. That all points that the lower has been refined, worked with the lower ones. And the world has become outside it, become a refinement. That's Tachtonim. But still, it's sad them gufos the avoidis damol given verbunden mit mato. But since this service was connected with the Tachtonim, with Madulo, was his mitzad atzmi bein which is on his own, has really no comparison to God and His Elyonim. It's your own energies, the energies that comes with the matter. Is euch der gilu elokus was is nimshach geworden durch avodah. So also the revelation of godliness that extended through this work, given mit sumtzum umugbal liferach hatachtoin. It was restricted and it was limited relative to the tachtoin. Biz as Lech miktane amonoye. Lech himself was of the small believers. He had to be pushed into the teva from the Meimabel. Azayna soge in Halakus is given beikar, his understanding, his grasp in God was mainly in the Yonim Azaynan Farstandik and Seichel Abrohim, in those matters that are understood in the human intellect, the created intellect, Tachtonim, low ones. Over the Inyon Elikus was keneginum nor mit emuna, but matters of godliness that you cannot take with the intellect, but only with belief, which is shalamayla ma'aseichel, beyond seichel, which is al yonim. That was on a small level. It was the small believers. So therefore, it means that it was measured that the Tachtonim limited according to his ability, by his refinement. This is like the second way. Similar to the flow of the teacher in the second way, as the Seichel was the Talmud is Mechadish B'koyach Atzmei, that idea that the student comes up in his own, and the novelty idea on his own strength, is a seichel mitzumtzum. That's a restricted seichel, a small, a confined, and it is no comparison to the seichel harab. Und in der Aveda von Avraham Avinu, so this is 10 generations till Noach, the generation of Noach, the Parshas Noach. And then we have Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu combined both of them. That Aveda from Avram Avinu, so there they were both advantages. The Haschole, the Yisoid from Zayin Aveda, the opening, the beginning, the basis, the foundation for his service is given up Yisechel, was according to the intellect. Through proof of worldly matters. But together with that, he was also the upper level. He did not question God's measures, Hashem's measures. He found his heart was trustworthy before you. He took godliness with innocence and with simplicity, as a simple slave. So he had both intellectually and also accepted it with sosos levov and namutna. Rabbi adds in the brackets, and similar to this, as it relates to his publicizing godliness in the world. As in them that here too there were both of advantages. That the matters of godliness that he publicized, in their essence, they were beyond the accepting ability of the vessels of the human intellect to accept. And yet, and still he found an explanation for those matters which will be on sechel. Biz azafilu and yonim anoshim pshutim b'yoser, so that every very simple people should also be able to understand it. So kennes bagreif should be able to grab it, able to perceive it. Bedugma v'dashpo and drit neufen, and this is similar to the influence that the Rav teaches this child in the third way, was the Chusha Talmud Verem with the Chusha Arab, that the capabilities and the qualities of the students become like the Chusha Arab in the higher level. And yet, this is done by Avram Avinu as a preparation. Ultimately, the Rebbe explains now in Oizvov, this real connection will be when Matan Torah came around. This was only the preparation. But also this third way of the flow, as the Chushya Talmud Verem the Chushya Rav, that the capabilities of the students become like the capabilities of the teacher, is a moshul nor of der hachona. That is only a parable for the preparation to chibur el yerim tachtonim, to the connecting of the upper and the lower. How it has been accomplished through the service, the work of Avraham Avinu. But it does not represent the nitoy from chibur gufa v'sigvor Matan Torah. But this does not represent the actual connection that took place during Matan Torah. As Rebbe explains, the fact that the influence of the Rav, as we give it in this parable, has the power to impact as the Chusha Talmud, that the qualities, the capabilities of the students, so that they should become like the capabilities and the qualities of the Rav, is as the far. The reason why he can do that was because even prior to that flow is the Talmud Bar Sechel. The student himself is an intellectual, somebody who has brains. To the extent he has enough brains that he can receive the flow of the Rav. The B'meila is the Sechel Talmud freer. Therefore, the intellect of the student, even before Father Ashpoah, Nitkin emeser tachten. It's not really a real low nitbein arochet. It's not infinitely not compared at all with Gabriel Sechlarab, next to Sechlarab, because he does have a sale. Noch better. Furthermore, bald as the Chusha Talmid werden später wie Chusha Rav, since they do become the capabilities of the students, become like the capabilities, like the qualities of the teacher, from the Chusha Talmid, through the refinement of the Chusha of the student. So it turns out as noise to them. In addition, that we just said before, was Euchfrir is the Talmud that he is not a real Tachten before Canal, because he is a Seichel, has a Seichel, is der Chibur for Rab mit dem Talmud. So where does the connection of the Rab with the Talmud connect? Not mit der Darge von Seichel HaTalmud. It's only with the level of the intellect of the student, was his Alev and his Dachir durch Hashpos Rab, which is elevated and refined through the influence and the teaching of the Rav. Aber nicht mit der Darge von Seichel HaTalmid, but not with that step, that level of the student's intellect that is mitzad atzmei farder hashpoah, the way he is on his own before the hashpoah. The part of the seichel that is able to be elevated, that gets elevated, but not the part that it's on its own that doesn't get elevated. That's the preparation for Matan Torah, as in that motion. As opposed to that connection of the above and the lower that has accomplished Matan Torah, is Aleph number one. Far Matan Torah the Tachtonim nit gehat kein shaychus to the Elyonim. Before Matan Torah, they had no connection. That represents the level that is mitzad atzmei. They didn't have, like by the student, didn't have any connections to the Elyonim. Adrabah, on the contrary, is given a gezeda shnit. There was a cut. Gezeda means a decree, but also means a cut. There was a cut. There was a separation. Und zeir chibur matan Torah. And how do they connect Matan Torah? Is nor b'koicha yizbarach hakol yachol. It's only with Hashem's powers, blessed powers, who can do everything. Who said his nisb'nanim noise? He is prevent from preventables. They cannot be prevented even from things that are not can't go along. So that also is not taken away from him. He carries opposites. When the river is, and therefore, number two, the chibur el yonim v'tachtonim b'matan Torah. So therefore, the connection of the intertachtonim matan Torah, oich mit der darge von der tachtonim v'zezayin mitzad atzmei tachtonim, as the connecting to the level there, both tachtonim. These two levels that we said before by the influence of the Rav to the Talmud, that number one, that they had some connection before, but by Matan Torah, the Tachtonim had no connection before. The fact by the Talmud that is a bar seichel that puts him a little bit in the category of the Rabbi is not a real Tachton, but by Matan Torah, the Tachtonim were real Tachtonim because they had no connection. There was a Gezeda. And the number 2 point that we found by the student who the Rebbe brought down, that you only connect to the level of intellect that is able to be elevated later on, but the Matan Torah was actually the Tachtonim itself that was connected. And the Rebbe brings down that these 4 different levels that we were discussing over here, the level of Elyonim, and then the level of Tachtonim, and then the level how the Elyonim connect with the Tachtonim, and then this higher level that it connects in the lowest part of the Tachtonim, are also applicable in the service of people now after Matan Torah, after that happened already, that connection, Avodah Sodom, Zayin. The Firei Fanim Anal, the 4 above mentioned ways, so similar to that exists now after the Torah was given in the service of man. One way, similar to the Avodah as is from above, Parshas Bereishis, 10 generation. In the Tkufa Modem Bad Noach, in this period from Adam to Noach, is as an Avodah is Mitzad HaNeshama, that his service is from the soul. Tut aber nit mitten guf. He is not working with his body. Can't do mitzvahs without the body. The fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs must be with the physical body. Is aber sein kavona v'ishtadlus, but his intention and his effort in them, when he does the nitzu poil sein of their guf, it's not to influence, impact the body. Their guf is by im noranem tzoy. The body is merely a means, an intermediary zu durchführen der Avoide, the Torah mitzvahs von der Neshama, in order to accomplish this service of Torah mitzvahs of the soul. Balachas kann bekommen, for sure not, as is nicht äußern zu poil sein in welchem Chutzloi, that he is not out to impact the world which is outside of him. That's the first one. The second way, which would be similar to the avodah that comes from below, the tekufa menoach vad Avram, the period that is from Noach Avram. Tut euch mit dem Guf und afile mit der Welt. That he's actually working with his body and also with the world. As is Ozaina Dirala Yisborev, that it should be a dwelling place for him, blessed. But Alpha became, but still is by Imnitod that Avekleg doesn't have that putting himself away, bis Mesiras Nefesh, to the extent of self-sacrifice. So Oisfirin de Kavone El Yena, that he should accomplish the supreme intent as the Welt soll werden Adirle Yisborach, that the world should become a dwelling place for him, blessed. So while he wants a Dirle Yisborach, but he doesn't devote himself totally, doesn't put himself away for this. Und sein Ton in them is nur, and he does it just to the extent of wieviel das is negate zu sein Metzias, to the extent that it touches his existence to mal sein tafkin. To mal sein tafkin. It's just to fulfill his job, what he needs to do. L'dugma. So what do we example? Is sich Tage mishtadel zu poilen auf andere Jiden zu makarev sein sie zu Torah mitzvahs. He actually puts an effort to impact other Jews, to bring them close to Torah mitzvahs. Aber sein Ishtadlus in them, but his effort in this is not a wifel das is verbunden, is only to the extent that it's connected with Kiyum Atzivu to fulfill. He does it to the extent that he fulfills the command of Cheyach Techich Amisecha. Torah tells him that you have to rebuke your Amisecha, your friend. But that isn't his topic about it. That's what he was commanded. Und ihm fällt die Messira und Messina zum Tachlis Amakumen. But he lacks that devotion, that setting himself away to the goal, the intent, Ayena Eden Zon is Karavan, that those Jews should become close. He's just interested in his fulfillment of his mitzvah, but he's missing, he's not working at the goal of bringing them into Torah mitzvahs. Similar was the conduct of Noach with the generation of the flood. Although he rebuked them for 120 years, every day and day. He's the sober given be'iker, but that was only mainly that was just to fulfill his command. Was is nicht stabil geworden. He was commanded. Und der Fahr, sein Teichacha. So therefore, when his rebuke, as on Shuvaton hat nicht geholfen, didn't help, hat sich nicht eingestellt mit einem Mesiras Nefesh. That's why he did not put himself into this with Mesiras Nefesh, with self-sacrifice, to bet Narachim say, to ask mercy on them. So in the first case, he doesn't do with the outside altogether. In the second case, he does with the outside, but not for the purpose for himself, just to fulfill his obligation, but not to bring them in close on their own. Like Noach did what Hashem told him. And then if they didn't listen, he didn't work with them on their own. But the third way, which is similar to the service at the time that we prepare for Matan Torah, in which we already feel the connection of the upper and the lower, is as sich mishtadel mit Übergegebenkeit, that he puts an effort with devotion. This is already reaching to the level that you care about the goal, that you devote yourself, bis mesiras nefesh, to the extent of mesiras nefesh, to oisfiren the kavone, to accomplish the intent, make the world into a dwelling place for Hashem blessing. And for sure, mitzadem hergish, for Nahavas Yisrael, because you feel love of that fellow Jew, first you're changing the world to make it Baruch. And because of your sense of love of that fellow Jew, so Makaras I need to bring in termites. Seems like this is the ultimate, but then we still have the fourth level, actual Matan Torah in Avodas Hashem. Aber von deswegen das an Eufel und mit Zulazvu. So then, still, when you're doing in a way with the other person, it's in a way, Aleph, that Mavukish is not Eufzoim Yenem. What is that you are wanted? What is the desire here? Is just to raise Yenem and Makarav Zanim to Torah Mitzvahs. You want to bring him closer to the mitzvahs. Aber nicht that Zugetragenkeit zu Yenem, but it's not a devotion, a putting yourself close to the other person, as he is in his low level. It's for the purpose of raising him, but not to where he is, find himself. Also the effort to bring the other person close to the service of Hashem is dafke when they feel that Yener is shaykh to miskaver. It's only when he feels that he can bring him closer. If he can't bring him closer, it doesn't bother. Aderech v'geret frier sivov, similar to we talked earlier, sivov v'negedam chibur for Rav mit Talmid in the dritten Eifen as the connection with the Rav and Talmud in the third way as Aleph. Number one, the chibur bar state in them was the chusha Talmud werden is dachich werden v'chusha Rav, that the qualities of the student, that connection that happens between the Rav and the Talmud is that the qualities of the student become refined and they meet and they become like the Chusha Rav. And that would be like in this case that you want to raise the other one, that they should bring to Torah mitzvahs. But you're talking about Chush, not in his level in which he's by himself. And the reason why you could elevate him is because he was before a Bar Seichel, and therefore you're only Makar of somebody that couldn't be closer. So this was similar to the conduct of Avram Avinu. Although he devoted himself with self-sacrifice for the people of his generation, that he impacted them, that they should recognize and they should announce that as Welt is a Lekus, that God is a Lekus. So he did connect the world with Hashem by declaring that Olam is Kale, that it's not a separate. He put himself in danger. So Misal Spal Zain up Pilu Franch is going to pray even for the people of Zdaim. Is Ober Zain Tfila given nor. This is based on the Maimer, that to put himself in danger, to insist like that, talking to Hashem like that. Is Ober Zain Tfila given nor, but yet it was only as his own nitzel werden b'zchus hatzadikim, that they should be saved in the merit of the righteous. Was given is dort, that find themselves there. Was they seinen poila zichuch in einem Ort, wo sie given is, because they impact a certain level of refinement in the place where they are. So the tzaddikim refine over there. They elevate it. When he found out that there is no 10 tzaddikim. Therefore, it's not a place that is going to do tshuva, as it says in the Zohar. He didn't ask anymore. So that's number 3, because it was lacking. If there is no zichuch, and if there is no way that they're going to do tshuva, it left it go. But a ferter oifen is, but the 4th way is as an avid satzvit niden is kamecha. He loves the other yid as himself. An ava atzmis, a essence love, was his hecher from cheshbonu, which is beyond calculations. For any considerations, on the river, giter sich avek farim, and therefore he devotes himself, he gives himself over for that person. Even then, when intellectually he sees no advantage by the other person. He's not doing it because he figures of the calculation. Maybe after all this, he will be able to bring them close to Hashem. No, it's not based on the calculation. But because his essence of love to him. This is that connection from the Elyon Tachtonim was his Nechadish geworden, the Matan Torah that came new to Matan Torah. As der Chibur is mit the Tachtonim, wie sie seine mitzad atzmim sehr Nibirkeit. That connection is with the lower ones as they are by themselves in their low state. So derech ze is given an Hage from Moshe Rabbeinu. But similar to this was Moshe Rabbeinu's. This is the 4th level in which Moshe Rabbeinu was Durchim is Matan Torah on Niklas al Shmoi. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one that gave the Torah, and the Torah is called Torah Tzivulonu Moshe. But as hat sich eingestellt auf viele von der Israel, that he put himself in, even for those who created that calf. Und das in such a way as that if you're not going to forgive the erase me. He did not move from them until Hashem told him, I forgive as you asked. That's the 4th level. So in approach to another yid, you can first of all not do with another yid altogether. That would be the 1st level. You're just doing with the neshama, even though you have to do with the goof, but you're still not doing it for the purpose. You're just using the body as an intermediary. The 2nd way is that you're doing the noyach, but you don't do it with a devotion. It's done, but not with that devotion. As Rebbe brings down, you only do it to the extent that you have to rebuke him, but not more than that, which what Noach did. And the 3rd way, which was the way Avram did it, is to make the world into a dir b'tachtonim. But only, still, that lacks only if you are able to raise, and only the purpose is to raise them, and only if you feel that you could be raised, but otherwise you don't. Moshe Rabbeinu was in the 4th and the highest level of that connection, that even if they did the egel, they should be forgiven, and to the extent that otherwise, leizoz b'tamon adam l'sachila to Hashem forgive. Based on all the above, we'll understand that this preparation of connecting Elyonim v'Tachtonim that started after Lech. As you already asked before, parts of Avram's birth is mentioned in the portion of Noach, but this Chibur Tachtonim, Elyonim Tachtonim of Avram, that started after Lech. When the service of a yid to make the world for a dwelling place for him, blessed, is beikar mitzad zayin mitzias, when it's mainly because of his to do his obligation. The malis tafkito creates to fulfill his obligation. He's trying to do what's right for him. Feldan in sein Öfton in Welt. Then it's missing in your accomplishment in the world. Similar, if you are going to rebuke another person, you want to fulfill the mitzvah, if you're just doing it for the mitzvah, is a filuben that is tutas me upon me, even if you do it 100 times, Victor's nit if yenem stark, that doesn't impact the other person so strongly that when you rebuke somebody, listen, what I want is your favor. So that works a lot better. So in order to accomplish in the world, in them the Avram Avinu even to the extent that Avram Avinu did before Matan Torah, the chibur that wasn't complete. For sure, to prepare the world the way he's going to bring the Matan Torah. You must leave and you must exit. Go out of your own Metzias. Lech, leave your land, your place of birth, your homes. Which is interpreted Artzecha, your wants, your regilison, that's Meladetcha, Midus, things that you're used to, and also your intellect. Also, when we talk about the Kedusha, is Lech Lecha, from your wants and your Midos and Beisavicha and your intellect. And that is when you can really accomplish. Can also explain. Although Parshas Breis in general, Unsi and Parshas Lech, and the end of the Parshas Zayin and Lecha, they're happy, is the Emes Lecha, but the true happy week is Obadavke Parshas Lecha, is specifically the portion of Lecha. Simcha is put together. Simcha breaks through all limitation, boundaries. Therefore, Parshas Breishis, the portion of Breishis, bald as the Simcha from the Sedre is. Since the Simcha of that Sedre, as it says in the talk, Mitzad them was the Eibishter Baruch Shor, Bashafen Welt in the Vroim, it's because Hashem created the worlds and creation. Is just not Simcha Bishlam Musa, that's not the complete Simcha. Because although that through the creating of the world from ex nihilo to existence, that expresses, it brings out the godly spark was is nit mugder in ayin and yesh. That godly power which is not defined by ex nihilo, by nothing and existence. It's higher. Basically, it breaks through. That happens with creation. So creation does that, but not completely. Deswegen. The Baldas the Welt disease in Parsha Bereshis, since the world as it is in the portion of Bereshis, is given in as a was in such a way as it kim is given mitzad lamaila, its existence was from above, unit mitzad der teuchel from Welt gufa, not because of the content, the world itself. But so therefore they could not sense it so much that inyan from Pritzak Dorim Daim Yesh, the bursting of the limitations of Aim Yesh, when the Riber is as Nitkin Simcha Bishlem Musa, therefore it's not a Simcha complete. Derech says been a gate from Seif from Parshas Noach. So we'll end the Parshas Noach. Ladies Avram Avinu. When Avram was born, the first one who made the preparation to nullify the cut and the decree between the above and the low. Pritzak Dorim. As it bald dan is noch nit given da achona bepoil. Since it wasn't the actual preparation in the end of Parshas Noach, that only began at Lecha. He says the Rebbe noch nit kislimcha b'shlei Musa is still, therefore, it's not a complete simcha. Davke Parshas Lech Lecha, specifically the portion of Lecha, Since then was actually accomplished the achone, the preparation to chibur al yonim v'tachtonim, the connection from the above and below, is the riber the emes afrei l'chavoch. That's why that is the true happy week. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Noach, Shabbos Parshas Bolok, Tavshin Chav Dalet.